Thank you for joining us today. It is our fifth ProVisors webinar. And today I am very excited to present to you Daniel Linskey. He is a new ProVisors member with the Milton Group in Boston. He is currently the managing director in Kroll's Investigations and Disputes practice and is head of the Boston office. He is also the former superintendent-in-chief of the Boston Police Department and a 27-year veteran of the force. Dan provided strong leadership through some of the most tragic and contentious events in the city's history, including the Boston Marathon bombings and the Occupy movement. Without any further ado, I'm going to pass this over to Dan to take it from here.
Thanks, Sharon. I want to thank Mark Hankin for giving me the idea to do this and share my thoughts on leadership. Along with the work I do at Kroll, a lot of our clients, I get hired to go out and do keynote addresses for companies and their clients. And whether you're me in a law enforcement capacity, leading in the crisis that I had, or it's your own crisis, COVID-19, your business is being challenged, a situation at home, a web hack, whatever your crisis is. I've been able to talk to leaders around the country, in fact, outside the country as well, and share some of my thoughts on leadership. So I've been in the quest for leadership my entire life. Always knew I wanted to be a cop. And the one thing that's going to be new for me is I usually walk and I do these presentations and I have a whole PowerPoint behind me. But I'm going to try moving PowerPoint in here a little bit. And I'm going to just share my screen as I talk a bit. And is that picture showing up? Hopefully.
Yes, there is a picture showing up, but there's a PowerPoint error in front of it.
Well,
and it's very wide.
Let's try this then. Slideshow from the beginning. You know what? Technology's failed me today. So the picture I was going to try and show you is of my best friend's dad, Jeremiah J. Hurley. And my dad was sick and passed away young. And I spent a significant time with Jerry Hurley. He was very impactful in my life. And I wanted to be a Boston cop. I didn't want to play for the Red Sox. I didn't want to play for the Celtics or be an astronaut. I wanted to be a Boston cop my entire life. And I got the opportunity to do that at a very young age. I was 19 years old when I went to the police academy. I graduated. I was 161 pounds, full head of dark hair. I could run my 3 miles in under 16 minutes. So not much has changed. But I graduated the academy April 18th, 1987. And 3 days prior to that, my first assignment was at the Boston Marathon. And wait a minute here. I'm sorry, this technology is killing me. So I'm no longer sharing, right? Hopefully.
You are no longer sharing. We can see you.
Great. So my first assignment was at the corner of Boylston and Hereford Street. I'm a 19-year-old kid. My entire life, all I wanted to do was be a Boston police officer. And I get the ability to do that at 19. And my first job was protecting the Boston Marathon. 27 years later, standing at that same intersection, what was a dream that day was a nightmare. And I'm going to talk to you about what we did and what we learned. And as I went through my career, I was a real cop. I arrested bad guys. I did undercover narcotics cases. I did search warrants, kind of the stuff you saw on TV. And then I went in and became a boss. And, a mentor of mine kind of made me become a boss and gave me a boot in the behind and told me to think about doing things differently, which I did. And he made me step up. And as a result, I got myself as to the chief of police job at the age of 43 in the city of Boston. Great department, nationally recognized. And we could rest on our laurels and do things the way we were doing things. We were pretty good. But as any agency and any leader knows, I'll tell you, especially for police officers, I'm sure it is in your companies as well, but police officers, they hate change. And I know employees, people generally hate change, but the other thing I know that cops hate is the way things are, right? So we hate change and we hate the way things are. I started looking at the threats and the challenges we were facing in law enforcement, and it was a lot different than the threats and challenges we faced when I was a young patrolman. It wasn't just drug dealers and robbers and bank robbers. Homeland security, terrorism had now moved into the realm of being on our table and something that we had to deal with. And I got awakened really, my eyes wide open when I was on a family vacation in New York with my wife. It was the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade weekend. And as I was going there, I got notified by our intelligence officer that New York was subject to a potential terrorist attack during the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, that Al Qaeda was trying to attack the subways potentially. So that made my vacation go really well. While I'm trying to not have Al Qaeda get my family while I'm in New York, I learned of the attack going on in Mumbai. And Mumbai has, as you well know, there was terrorists. They did an asymmetrical attack where they didn't just do one and done, where they attack a location and they have their standoff and they die. They were going throughout the entire city trying to wreak as much havoc and terror as they could. They had attacked the police station, the transportation station. They had several hotels that they were under siege. There were explosive devices at the Taj Hotel that were being exploded, people being shot, and they had lit the hotel on fire. The Mumbai officials found themselves standing there, and the Mumbai police leader and the State Department eventually bring the Mumbai leaders over to Boston, and that's where I had an opportunity to sit down and debrief them and ask them what worked and what didn't work. As I've been trying to be a leader throughout my entire life, I've found that there is no course, right? I didn't find it at Harvard at the Kennedy School. I didn't find it at the FBI Academy. I didn't find it at the Marine Corps. I always got nuggets of leadership, but I always wanted to find the perfect course, the perfect book, the perfect person. And it's not about that. It's a lifelong lesson of putting little bits and pieces together of leadership. And one of the things I believe firmly in is learning from my mistakes and others' mistakes. So I asked the chief of Mumbai, what was one of the challenges you had? Well, they're standing outside the hotel and the police chief is looking at the hotel burning, people being shot, and bombs being there. And he says to the fire chief, can you guys put the fire out so my guys can go in and deal with the shooters? Well, you can guess what the Mumbai fire chief thought of the sequencing of that action. He really thought that the police should go in first, get the shooters before the firemen go put out the fire. And the bomb squad said, hey, when you guys figure it out, we're going to get rid of those bombs after everyone's, the place isn't on fire and no one's shooting at us anymore. Well, that same situation, if it came to Boston, the same terrorists who were attacking Mumbai have thought and planned and attacking the United States. What was going to happen in Boston if we had that conversation? In Boston, what we learned is that my teams, police, canines were doing canine training, SWAT was doing SWAT training, fire was doing fire training, medics doing medics training, hospitals and nurses were doing hospitals and nurses training. We weren't training together, we were training in silos. And when the bang goes off and you have that bad day, you're all going to come together. So you got to learn to train together, to fight together. And I believe in firmly train the way you fight and fight the way you train. Don't pretend that you're going to do it. You need to get out and exercise your plans, make sure, and if you can, make it as real as possible. I also realized that me developing training is not the best thing. The best thing for me to develop training is to get the people on the front lines to develop their own training. People who know what works and what doesn't work. I don't know about you and your organizations. Sometimes I'd come up with these ideas and I would send them down range. And no one would ever tell me, Chief, that's a stupid idea. It really doesn't work here for the cop on the street who has to do it. But they would all talk about it and they would all work around it or fix it on their own way. So we brought a bunch of frontline troops, cops, firefighters, medics, hazmat experts, SWAT experts, and we had them develop the training. The training was called Urban Shield. It was a 24-hour exercise where police, fire, EMS, hospitals, doctors, nurses from around the entire region, not just the Boston police, came and trained together. And we did, you did 8 hours of your specialty training and 3 hours of an ollie entrance free, wherever you were in the region. You came to the cruise terminal and we had terrorists with real life role players. I had people with missing arms and legs who looked like they had just been the victim of an explosion. If the first time you see a human being with a missing leg is on Boylston Street, you're going to freeze. And you probably, and at that point, we hadn't even put tourniquets into our first response or put them into our officers' hands. So we would have been looking at people on Boylston Street saying, I wish I had tourniquets. I wish I knew what to do with tourniquets. You train the way to fight and fight the way you train. We did 2 of those adventures, 2 of those training cycles twice before the Boston Marathon. 3,000 cops, firefighters, medics, docs, and nurses all trained together and got better. And what we learned is what we were good at, what we weren't good at, what equipment we needed, what training we needed, and how to fix things as best we could. Marathon day at my house. I get up very early. My wife, I ran the marathon for the 100th one year, and she came and she started to get the bug. So she started to come every year, and she really enjoyed the marathon. And she was, quite honestly, a zealot fan. She would ring the cowbell for hours at a time. And when I was the chief, somehow my wife and kids would show up for the marathon day, and they kept getting in the front row, right in the front row of the VIP viewing section. I never asked anyone to do that. I never said anyone shouldn't do that. So that particular year, Michelle had gotten a promotion at Tufts Medical Center, and she couldn't come to the marathon. The day started out normal. I was up about 4 a.m. making phone calls. My wife in her promotion, she had to go off to work early. She told me to take the boys with me, drop them off down the marathon. She was going to go to the hospital, get out around 3 o'clock, meet us down there, ring her cowbell for the runners for about an hour, and then we'd go about and have a nice family dinner. And that's what we did. I can tell you, I made an executive decision. She went off to work, and I saw my 2 boys are 15 and 18, and I said, you know what? They really don't want to be hanging out on Monday with no school watching the marathon. They only go because their mother makes them. So I made an executive decision. I'm the chief of police, and I let my kids sleep in. I remember my oldest, when I said, I'm going to let you sleep in, buddy. He said, is mom okay with that? And I said, hey, I'm the chief. She'll be okay. I got it completely wrong. I briefed my troops that morning beforehand, and I told them that the marathon finish line was a potential location for a terrorist attack. And I told them that that attack would occur at some point when the lead runners were coming down the street. And I used these exact words. This attack could be an active shooter event. The attack could be a backpack bomb. The attack could be somebody with a knife who jumped over the fence like they did in another marathon, trying to stab the lead runner. The attack could be some kid who wants to get on TV with a Free the Narwhals or Occupy Wall Street or something. But make no mistake about it, they'll hit us when the whole world is watching us. And we were prepared for that. I'm not going to be able to share this video, it seems, and maybe I'll take a break for one part from the video, but no one took the threat of bombings more seriously than me. Because as a young cop, October 28th, 1991, I responded to 2 police officers down. The officers were bomb technicians. They were examining a device that was under somebody's car. It was a wooden box. It looked suspicious. It had magnets. It had fallen off of this gentleman's car. And as they were examining it and turned it over, the box exploded. When arriving at the scene, one of the officers lost his eye, a pretty significant head injury. Second officer had his hand blown wide off, and his leg was dangling, and he was in danger. And as he's lying on the ground bleeding, he's screaming at us that there are secondary devices. He's telling all the cops, there are secondary devices, leave me here. Well, no one left him. They picked up the pieces literally and rushed him to the Brigham Women's Hospital. And I'll never forget in the emergency room when the doors of the ambulance opened, I saw my wife. My wife was an ER nurse at the time, and I knew my wife and her team were such great doctors and nurses that if anyone could save this cop, they were going to save him. But after 6 hours, that police officer succumbed to his wounds. That cop was Jeremiah J. Hurley. He was my best friend's dad. He's the reason to put a badge upon my chest. And I watched him die in a bombing. So I feared bombs. I feared bombs, and I was fearing bombs on Marathon Day. On Marathon Day, this is the 7th year that I was in charge. I do 2 things. One, I walk that entire route in the city of Boston. It's only about 3 miles in, comes in Boston, goes into Brookline, comes back into Boston. So I walk the first mile out, I cross the street, come back in, walk to the finish line. I make sure we're all set. I do that because I want to make sure our EOD, our explosive ordnance detection team, are dotting I's and crossing T's to make sure that we're doing it by the numbers. Is that your bag over there, ma'am? Whose bag is that? And I was walking with my EOD teams doing that. We went out 1 mile, came back, walked back. We swept both sides of the finish line twice before the event started. Not only do I check for bombs, but I also get to thank my cops. So I was a real cop, and now I'm a chief. And as a chief, I have meetings and I do PowerPoints. So I like to get out of the street and thank my cops for what they do every day. They run towards bullets for me and the citizens of Boston. And I literally shake their hand and say, you know, appreciate what you did. That arrest last night, that kid was going to kill someone if you hadn't stopped him. Hey, it's good to see you back. I know your back was hurt there. You feeling better? Yes, sir, I'm feeling better. It's the second police car you crashed on me in, 2 months. Can you slow it down a little, Speedy Gonzalez? And I shake every one of my cops' hands. And I was walking down the line of cops, and I'm looking for bombs. I'm doing kind of dual tasks at the same time. This young cop's there, and I forget his name. They're getting younger and younger, and I'm getting a little older. And I apologize for forgetting his name, and he tells me, it's Andy, Chief. And I said, that's right. I'm sorry. Happy Patriots Day. And I tap him on the shoulder, and I went to walk back to the next cop. And he says, hey, boss, I just bought the house 5 houses up from you. And I said, I didn't even know the house was for sale. Up the street, down the street? What do you mean? And he says, up the street. And I realized, geez, I didn't know the house was up for sale. But I spent 20 minutes talking to this young cop about schools. I sent my kids to St. Mary's of the Hills. At that time, my eldest had just gotten into Harvard. So and by the way, I'm sorry, but I got to brag. My kid got into Harvard. So I talked about the schools my kids went to. Where you should go for steaks, Fairmount Grill. I told him we can get the best beer, the coldest beer, and best buffalo wings in Boston. And I spent 20 minutes talking to this young cop in front of this new restaurant, the Forum Restaurant. And I was just saying hello to my new neighbor. I kind of get out of my watchful mind of the police chief who was looking for threats. And then I walked that route, and I shook every one of those cops' hands, and I walked back, and the first mile's covered. And now the lead runner's coming down the street, and we were standing on the sidewalk looking at that crowd. And I was ready, and my cops were ready for an attack. And they didn't attack us. And the governor puts laurel wreaths on people's heads, and the national anthems are played, and people go about their business, and things are good. I think we're all set. It's just a road race now. Now I usually have to deal with drunken college kids out in Brighton who do stupid things. And if that's my biggest threat for the day, we're good to go. So I went out to Brighton, and I was shaking those cops' hands and thanking them for what they do. I got back in my car. I went to right by Fenway Park. I had half a mile to go. 100 cops, going to shake their hands, thank them. By about another 45 minutes, my wife's going to meet me at the finish line. We're going to have a great dinner together. I'm going to take my uniform off. One of my guys is going to take over, and it's another marathon under the books for me. I am walking by Fenway Park, and I hear a police officer. His name is Dan Keeler. He's the Delta 984. And Dan is a very level-headed street cop. He, former homicide guy. We've had some bad days at the office together, and I have never heard Dan Keeler out of control. I've never seen him not ready to go. And Dan was, I couldn't understand a word he was saying. And I knew he needed me on Boylston Street. And I apologize to technology with the Zoom meeting. I can't pull up the audio from this audio tape, but Danny essentially starts screaming, and 80, 200 cops, whatever, were all hitting their radio mics and cutting each other off, and no one could hear what was going on. And I got to Boylston Street, and Dan Keeler saw me. And he did an amazing job. He knew the plan. He eventually got the dispatcher to just talk to him, and everyone else he wanted to be quiet. And Danny started the response. And when I showed up on Boylston Street, Danny ran up to me and said, boss, they hit us twice. They blew a device. They let a device go, and as people were running away, they blew a second device. And as Dan Keeler is telling me that, I'm standing in front of the Forum Restaurant. And that young new neighbor of mine has got a significant leg injury. And next to him is an 8-year-old little boy. Of all the people they could put the bomb behind. My cops, anyone they wanted to, they picked an 8-year-old boy. And next to the little boy is a beautiful young woman, and they are devastated. They destroyed them. They destroyed them on my street, on my watch, when they were under my care. And I didn't make chief at 43 because I haven't been through, I'm a pretty good crisis guy. I've seen some stuff. I've had some bad days at the office, but I couldn't fathom what I was seeing in front of me. And as I'm dealing with those images of that little boy, I realized that we're in front of the Forum restaurant and that young cop and I had spent 20 minutes talking. And I didn't do what I usually did, which was be on the lookout for bombs. And along with the devastation in front of me, a wave of shame and guilt rolled over me. And as a former United States Marine, as the chief of the Boston Police Department, my response was to freeze. I froze right there on Boylston Street. Somebody screamed that there's secondary devices, and I heard that once before in my life, and that wasn't a good day, and I need to get out of here, and I gotta go. And I'm trying to figure out how to get out of here, and I can't go because people are looking at me like there's something I'm supposed to be doing, and oh man. This woman appeared, and she had a leg injury, and I know how to do that. I did first aid since I was 14. I ran over and I grabbed the napkin off a table. I put her leg up, and I started putting pressure on her leg, and I got it, and I've got her leg, and we got a woman. I need an ambulance, and and then a medic and a firefighter come over, and they had the actual proper medical kits to put that dressing on right, and we've got it, chief, we've got her, and I wasn't letting go of her leg because I could do that. I didn't have a solution for this. And a Massachusetts state trooper came over to me and grabbed me by the collar of my neck, pulled my jacket, and told me he needed me in the middle of the street. I'm the chief of the Boston Police Department. A Massachusetts state trooper puts his hands on me, and he's going to tell me what he needs? Get up off of me! He says, Danny, I'm just. I said, Mark, I know exactly what you're just. I know exactly what you're just. Give me 1 second, Mark. Give me 1 goddamn second. It opened. My file cabinet opened. Every leadership nugget that I've been on a quest for opened. Every boss I said, I want to be like that guy, was there. Every idiot I said, I'll never be that guy, was there. All my planning, all the training, Urban Shield was there. I just had to open it. So the file cabinet popped open. And I was furious. I wasn't furious at Marky Horgan, who's a good friend of mine, for reminding me to be the boss. I was furious at myself for having to be reminded. But once I got reminded and my cabinet could open, it's a pretty good cabinet. And we're looking around, and one of the first things that come up to me is one of my officers said, Chief, no ambulances. I need ambulances. And I remembered Urban Shield, and we had a plan for if we were overwhelmed, that we would use police cars for ambulances. And I looked at him and I said, Cullum, get the wagons down here. We've got 13 wagons in this plan. I want 3 patients in the back of each wagon with medics. Get them off this street. Now go. Boom. I didn't have to do anything else. Colin Lydon had written the after-action plan for Urban Shield. He went out, and if I could play the audio tape, you'd hear Colin Lydon calling for those police wagons. 33 patients were put in the back of police wagons. 3 were put in the back of police pickup trucks. After the bombs went off, they were in emergency rooms, OR suites, or the triage tent under professional medical care within 22 minutes. Everyone who left that scene alive is alive today. Now, the next thing was, what do you do next? And I had this course that I had gone to where this general had talked about when it all goes sideways, you need to come up with 5 of the most critical things. In crisis, there are 500 things you need to do. Think about what you went through with COVID and your IT departments and your employees and colleagues. There's 500 things to do, but what are the 5 most important right now? You can't come up with 1. You can't come up with 10. You'll never remember them, but 5. You give your team 5 things you need them to do right here, right now. And more important than what you tell them to do is the manner in which you tell them. You have to be the calmest and coolest you've ever been in your entire career. You got to have a squared away uniform, your shoes nice and clean, and you stand up at that nation. You can hear it yourself. But I told people that I need Yankee Charlie 2. We're going to set up a command post at the firehouse on Boylston Street. I need all outside command, all outside EOD support to go to the firehouse on Boylston Street. We're going to set up an incident command there. We're then going to conduct a sweep with EOD assets to get people out of the restaurants and bars after we evacuate and triage these patients off the street. And I need somebody up there to get on social media and tell the world what just happened here. I activated social media right from the scene because I knew if we weren't engaging social media, we were never going to get a message out to people who were cowering in bars that just had the windows blown out, waiting to see whether it was safe to go out in the street or not. So we got up and running, and I got some responses back from my police officers afterwards that some of them were frozen, just like me. And they said, the calmness in your voice, I didn't know what you had, but I knew you had a plan and that we were going to be okay. And that's what I tried to do that particular day. We had a lot of bad information. And in crisis, you can't believe anything anyone tells you. Everyone lied to me. They didn't lie. There was bits of information. They told it from someone who heard something, someone who said something. I work for Fox News as a talking head, and I come in whenever there's a horrible day, there's an active shooter event at a school, and I basically fill time. And they're always looking for the second and third shooter where it's people describing the same person over and over again. So we started our investigation. We started doing what we have to do as cops, and we did what we did. At one point, I got a call from Congressman Steve Lynch, and he told me that he was with the father of the little boy who was killed. In an effort to save everyone, the father of the little boy was sent to one hospital. He had a significant leg injury. His wife was sent to another hospital. She needed immediate surgery for her eye. His daughter, Jane, was 7 years old. Her leg was amputated on the scene. A firefighter tied a tourniquet on her leg with his belt, an off-duty firefighter, and saved her life. And that 7-year-old kid was in Children's Hospital by herself. One of the brothers had been singed but unhurt, and Martin, the 8-year-old, was declared deceased at the scene, and his body was left on Boylston Street. The father found out that his son's body was on Boylston Street, and he wasn't happy. He signed himself out against medical advice. And he told the congressman that he was on his way down to get his son. He was going over to his wife's hospital to see her. She was coming out of recovery, but then he was going down to get his son. And I told the congressman, Steve, this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. I've ordered everyone out of the scene. The only one who can be there right now is bomb techs. We're still clearing devices. We don't know. There's thousands of bags down there. And no one wants that little boy off the street more than me. And he said, Danny, I know what you're doing. I know why you're doing it. I'm just letting you know. You could have a problem. He's upset. I called the captain who was in charge of that scene. And I told him, Frank, we got a problem. The father might be coming your way, and we can't have him get in that scene. And we also, no one is putting their hands on this father and arrested him. I've had those experiences where homicide scene set up and a relative comes in, starts pushing police officers, and now you're arresting grandma or the uncle of a victim of a homicide, and that just doesn't make any. So Frank Armstrong told me that he disobeyed my direct order. And he was there with 4 men. 2 of them were former Marines, and they were taking turns, 2 at a time, standing at attention over the young boy and the young body who they covered with sheets. And Frank Armstrong said he wasn't going to leave that little boy on the street. Those men were going to stay there all night. They were going to take him home. That's I got that information to our chaplain, Father Sean, who is the parish priest of the Richard family. Bill was coming into Denise's recovery room. Father Sean greeted him there and gave him the information about what was going on with Martin on the street. He told him that there were Marines and police officers guarding him. And when he went into his wife's room, the first words out of his Denise Richards' mouth when she woke up is, "Where is my baby?" Bill thought she didn't understand the severity of Martin's injuries, and he said, "Denise, Martin's gone." And she said, "I know Martin's gone, but where's my baby now?" And he looked at Sean, he looked at his wife, and he said, there are Marines and police officers who are with him, and they're going to take him home. They're guarding him right now. And she reached out her hand and she told her husband, "I told him before I left he wouldn't be alone. I just don't want my baby alone." That's the weight that was on my soul when I walked in my house at 2 a.m. And in the command post, I was that quiet, in charge boss, 5, 7, get me 2 of those, absolutely. But as I was driving home, the wave of shame and guilt that I had missed that device, I was just tearing up, and I could take that mask off at my house. And I walked into my house, and my wife and my kids gave me a hug, and my wife was kissing me, and I was telling them that I might have missed the device, and it might be my fault that boy's dead. And she's telling me, "It's okay, it's okay. Don't worry about it. It's okay. You didn't do that. You didn't miss it." And I'm trying to let her know what's going on. And she wanted to console me, and she gave me a big hug and a kiss, but then she had to yell at me because I forgot to tell her that the boys weren't at the Boston Marathon finish line with me that year, that I had let them stay home. And she was in a procedure with a patient when she got notified the 2 bombs went off at the finish line. And for our cell phone service melted in the city of Boston. And for 4 hours, my wife couldn't talk to her kids or find out where they were. And she was, I can tell you where my kids usually sit in that front row. I later saw nails, ball bearings, and human fingers. So I had a little making up to do on the home communication front down the road. So we started our investigation, and we went where it took us. Some great cops did some great work. The video that makes this case, we had it in 35 minutes. It just took some time to take it and analyze it and go through the process and identify white hat and black hat. We get white hat and black hat. We know who they are. The other good thing that was happening for me is the President of the United States came to town. And that takes no resources at all from police officers who work in 16 8-hour days that are already overwhelmed when the president comes with the first lady, and they're going to go to 5 locations that you have to secure for a presidential visit. Here's one of the things I call peerage. And we all make peers throughout our jobs and our networks, and lean on those peers in crisis. And I was getting texts and emails from folks, "Hey, anything I can do, let me know. You look good on CNN, get your sleep, think about that." And you should be doing that. When you're in a crisis, you should be having open communication with your peers. And when your peers are in crisis, you should be reaching out to them. "Is there anything I can do?" Sometimes just a kind word, knowing someone else cares, is enough to make you help get through the process. One of my peers is a colonel in the U.S. Air Force who's in charge of security. They know a little bit about security, I guess, in the Air Force where they secure our nuclear facilities. And he texted me, "Danny, thoughts and prayers, anything I can do, you let me know." Well, don't say that if you don't mean it. So I texted back, "Tommy, my EOD teams are spent. My canines were all compromised on the marathon day. We were hitting on other devices because when the bombs went off, the gunpowder's in the air and the dogs are now compromised. So they're hitting on devices that weren't there. And my cops are working 18-hour days. We're doing 150 call-outs. We're getting homeless guys backpacks and in the common that we're blowing up with water cannons, and we're just to the wall." And I asked my Air Force buddy, and that's why I'm proud to be a Marine, because I said, any chance you can get me some bombs and some bomb techs? And my Air Force buddy, and if you're in the Air Force out there in the audience, sorry for you. He texted back, "Dan, it's a violation of the Posse Comitatus Act for the U.S. Air Force to support local law enforcement." Well, I'm sure there's another Marine or two out there, and I can tell you, any of the Marines and we couldn't spell Posse Comitatus with a thesaurus. But if you called me and said you needed dogs, I'd break into a dog kennel and I'd show up with 50 mutts. They'd be there that morning. But I got Posse Comitatus from the U.S. Air Force. And then 2 minutes later, my buddy texted, "However, there'll be 50 dogs and 50 handlers there at 05 tomorrow morning to protect the Barack Obama, to assist the United States Secret Service in the protection mission of Barack Obama. Semper Fi, brother, go get the MFers." So Tommy Miner had a procedure, posse comitatus, right? How to do things. And we all have procedures, and procedures are great. But in the middle of a crisis, I don't need or want procedures. I want solutions. And Tom Miner gave me a solution. The president goes up. We're making a decision to put the video out, not put pictures out. We finally put the pictures out. You know the story. They wound up killing a cop at MIT, a beautiful young kid. And I was convinced. We actually had surveillance for a longer conversation. We had 30 cops and agents looking at 2 other students as suspects at MIT at the time of the murder of Sean Collier. And just from that, you can't make this up. We were on the other side of the campus in encrypted channels, and some of the cops and agents weren't even aware that the shooting had occurred. But once we found it, I was convinced that these were the Zanaev brothers, or I was convinced these were our terrorists. We got an early break where the victim had escaped from a carjacking that the terrorists had taken him into. And one of my officers spoke with him. This kid knew his tracking number off the top of his head. So we started tracking. We OnStarred the car and started to follow it. And I get into this police chase over in Watertown with my cops in Watertown, and pretty extensive shootout. And my cop, one of my cops who's in the shootout is in the shootout, and he's telling me he's also got a cop shot, and I'm trying to find him, and I do. We finally find him, and I ran down the street, and I come upon Dick Donahue, who's shot, and he's being worked on by a couple of my Boston officers, a couple of Harvard officers, and a state trooper. And they didn't need any help. If they could save him, they could save him. But over to my right was Tim Linskey, and he was shot. He'd been run over by his brother, and he was fighting still. He's a former professional boxer. He was in it to win it, and he was still resisting efforts to being handcuffed. And he deployed 5 bombs against my guys and Watertown officers, a couple others, in the gun battle, 3 of which exploded, 2 of which did not explode and were within feet of the fight that was going on with him, one of my gang unit officers, Jared Giroux, and Jeff Puglisi from Watertown PD. And I knew what I had to do. I ran forward, and I had a plan. I had my Glock 40 all ready to go. And I put my Glock right to his temple. And I expected to see a suicide vest. I had fully prepared myself for a suicide vest, and all I needed to see was the vest. All I needed to see was a radio, a cell phone, a garage door opener, a clicker. He had used remote detonation bombs against us on the marathon, and I was looking for remote detonation. I was afraid his brother was going to come back around to a backyard and remote det those bombs, and we were going to get killed. We stripped him there on the street, and he had nothing he could hurt us with. And a very hard decision I had in my life, I holstered my weapon. And I got a radio, and I called for an ambulance for the animal who murdered that little boy and 2 beautiful young women who just executed a cop, maimed 254 of my citizens, and just tried to kill us. We got him first aid. I leaned in as we put him in the ambulance, and I'm the last law enforcement official to speak with him alive. I looked him straight in the eye, and I told him he was going to burn in hell for what he did to that little boy. And I'm pretty confident my prediction is coming through now as we speak. We now had 1 down, and we had 1 to go. And there were cops from all over the place who had come and were running around, and it was like the Benny Hill show. What you should know, I know there's a lot of attorneys out in ProVisors, but what you should know, legally, in Massachusetts, the chief of the Boston Police Department has full jurisdiction for the city of Boston. And outside of my city, the jurisdiction is modified a little bit. I believe the correct legal term is nil or none. And no one was in charge. The poor chief of Watertown, his entire shift had been shot up and had been in gun battles. He's trying to help them get the town reverse 911. All these cops were running around and no one was in charge. Well, they murdered a baby on my watch, on my street. And by now, on Wednesday morning, when we had seen the videotape, I saw that the video showed the bomb was there for 6 minutes. So that wave of shame and guilt was off me. And I don't know what I would have done if I had walked by that device, but that wasn't the case. And we had work to do. And I grabbed the megaphone and started yelling at cops who don't work for me and told them, this is what we're doing. And I, of course, had enough emotional intelligence to go to the chief of Watertown and the head of the FBI, my boss, Ed Davis, and say to him, listen, this is what I think we should do tactically. Would you guys like me to implement this? And they all nodded on the plan. And peerage, I had leaders from the other agencies around me. John Arvanitis from DEA, who works with me at Kroll, Steve Rashadi from Secret Service, folks who just were there and helped us in group think and, help reevaluate the plan and helped implement the plan. We just started getting things going and we started running. We shut down 22 blocks and we started to do our thing. And crazy, all kinds of bad information flowed in and out. Lead here, lead there, and we thought we had them. We thought we'd have them, and we'd miss them. And you would be so excited that you thought it was going to end, and then it didn't end. We developed some leads. And at one point, I realized I didn't effectively communicate with my wife on marathon day. Well, at least she says I didn't effectively communicate with my wife on marathon day about my kids not being there. So I figured she'd seen the news and I should call in. I went out for the shootout. I left the house like 11 o'clock and now it's 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Friday. And I called my beautiful wife and said to her, Michelle, I'm safe. Listen, I got 100 men with rifles between me and him. I'm perfectly safe. And she said, oh, you're perfectly safe. Okay, good. Why is you're perfectly safe with 100 men protecting you? And my nephew, Jamie, and her nephew, Jamie, is on my SWAT team, is leading a SWAT team into a house in Watertown where they say the terrorist is in the attic and there's a law rocket in the basement. Why are you safe with 100 men protecting you and Jamie's going into that house? And I looked up on the screen and I saw Jamie leading a team and I said, you know what? I can't win with this woman this week. I'll try this another time. I love you. He's well-trained, well-equipped, and I got to go. My nephew, Jamie, is on the SWAT team. He's my wife's nephew. He's my nephew by marriage, and he was furious this week. Boston's a small town, but it's a big town, but it's a small town. Jamie's a good cop, but he's also he's a good dad, and he coaches his kids' baseball team when he can. And he was pissed because the first baseman on his baseball team had a bomb put up behind his legs and was killed. Jamie and his kids knew Martin Richards and their family and grew up with them in Dorchester. So he had a personal investment in this as well. We develop information that they're in Watertown, Massachusetts. I'm sorry, they're now in New Bedford, Massachusetts. And we got to get there quickly. I'm trying to figure out how to do that when the general from the National Guard said to me, Chief, would you like a Blackhawk? And I said, General, has anyone ever said no to the question, would you like a Blackhawk? And he said, no. I said, we're not going to start now. So we landed Blackhawks in the parking lot of the mall. And I put SWAT teams to go down. FBI had their lead team going up from Quantico. They're going to fly into New Bedford Airport. We put a state police team and a Boston team on to go down to New Bedford. I only had one team I could send, so I sent my nephew Jamie's team because if anyone kicked that door in to find him, I wanted Jamie to be there to say hello. And we hit the house down in New Bedford and found out it was the roommates who had stolen his drugs and his evidence of the bomb making and his cell phone, which thankfully they started to light up and talk to his relatives in Dagestan, which is how we got to the New Bedford address. We had pretty much searched everywhere and people were going home. And I had actually gotten tapped on the shoulder by my boss saying, I think I have to relieve you of duty. And there would have been a picture I would have showed you where I was actually kind of half asleep in the chair. I hadn't slept since Monday morning at 4 a.m. This is Friday afternoon at 4 p.m. And all the things I was telling my cops to do, I wasn't doing. And I knew he was right. I was having a hard time standing. And I got tagged out and literally fell down the stairs of the command post. Our firefighters had come out and they were cooking hot dogs and burgers for all the guys. Their gas grills and their pickup trucks. They just showed up cooking food. And one of them is a buddy of mine. He sees me. He's like, are you okay? I said, no, I'm going to leave the duty. I'm going home. He said, you're not driving, are you? I said, no, I'm not. And I threw him the keys. He's the president of the Firefighters Union. And I threw him the keys to my car. He said, you're driving. And Eddie Kelly, the president of the Firefighters Union, got to live out his dream. He drove a police car and drove me home. He poured me up my steps onto the couch with my wife. Jamie's team was just hitting the house in New Bedford, and I was hoping we were going to get him. But when they didn't get him, I was devastated and couldn't understand how this 19-year-old punk was beating us. And some time goes by, and I get a call from Billy Evans, who tells me, Chief, we might have him in a boat. We think we got a guy. I called for the cops, and he called for one SWAT team, and he told everyone else to hold the position. And I have a video I can show you, but no one obeyed that order. huge lessons learned with self-deployment, and the cops surrounded the boat in a 360-degree radius. And Zanaya stuck a boat hook through the plastic to poke a hole, we believe. And we believed him at the time to have an M4 rifle and extra bombs. So somebody fired a round. We don't know who that is because 300 plus rounds were fired at the boat. He was hit before. He was hit previously in the boat, and he was taken into custody. There's a video of the college kids waving American flags and thanking the cops, and you know, as they were driving out of Watertown that night after the capture. And a lot of people have seen that video live. I've seen it afterwards, but I didn't see that because I fell asleep on the couch. I was watching the SWAT team pull it out, and I had called and got a tactical sniper to cover Billy Evans and kind of took command of the scene on the radio to try and put order back into the boat scene and say, let's not get anyone else hurt here. Knock it off. This is what we're doing. And I turned it back over to Billy, and he was working with the FBI to negotiate him out of the boat. And I was watching that on TV, and I woke up at 4 a.m, my TV's off, and I'm on the couch. And the biggest case in my entire life, I just realized I went to sleep on. And I start screaming at my wife, how could you let me do that? What did you can't let me go to sleep. I'm the goddamn chief of police, Michelle. And she said, you went to sleep. You haven't slept since Monday. You're an idiot. You were unconscious. You weren't taking your medicine. Emma put cold compresses on you. The governor called you. The mayor called you. You know, all these cops called you. You were unconscious. You had nothing else to give. We got him. You got him. Is he alive? He's alive. Cops are okay. Cops are okay. So at that point, I went over to my phone, and I put out a tweet, Semper Fidelis. We got him from Martin. And I went and I got my uniform on, and I walked that crime scene, and I said 2 words to every cop, every agent, every National Guardsman, every one of them. I walked up to every one of them, and I said, thank you. Then 11 o'clock that day, I had an appointment to meet with the Richard family. They were now being treated in the same hospital room. I walked into the hospital, and I told them, Mr. Richards, my name is Daniel Linskey. I'm the chief of the Boston Police Department. And he said, I know who you are. Your nephew and his kids play with my Martin. I said, yes, sir, that's right. I made a promise to my wife and kids the night this happened. I made a promise to the President of the United States. Tuesday morning at roll call, when our cops were securing the scene and we were getting ready to start this investigation, I made them a promise. And I'm here to tell you we made good on that promise. The men who hurt your family will hurt no one ever again. And I hugged and I cried with that family. One of the most transformative moments of my entire life for about an hour. And I had to take that mask and put it back on because we got the terrorists in custody. We're not going to Disney. I got a case to put together. I got a city that still has crime. I got cops that saw things they should never have seen. And I don't want one of them putting a gun in their mouth because they can't get rid of the horror that keeps them up at night. And I have to figure out how I keep them mentally healthy and look out for their well-being. In fact, that very night, I had to go to a fundraiser for a family who a police officer was overwhelmed, stuck a gun in his mouth and took his life in front of his wife and his 3 kids while they watched him. And I had to make sure that that family got enough money to pay off the mortgage and to take care of the kids. It's my honor and privilege to share here. I apologize for the technical difficulties. I really hope you got something. We all have crises, and I hope your crisis is nothing like mine. But if you take those deep breaths, like your mother always told you, you have oxygen that'll take the cortisol and the adrenaline off your brain, off the amygdala, and you'll open up your file cabinet. And the quicker you open up that file cabinet, every lesson you've ever learned is in there, and you can start using them. It's not about having a perfect plan. It's having people who can plan. Thank you very much. Sharon?
I'm a bit rendered speechless. Thank you. That was amazing. And thank you not only for presenting to us, but for all of your service and what you did, and for sharing that with us. That is an incredible story. If anyone has questions, we do have a few minutes. I'm happy to feed them. I am curious. I'm going to ask you one question. Andy, the gentleman you stopped to talk to for 20 minutes, is he your neighbor still?
He's my neighbor. He's recovered from his injury physically. He's still having some challenges with the emotional toll, and he's working through it, still doing his job. You know, I'm not going out of the house, but I see him going out of the house to take care of people in the crazy threat we have right now.
Well, I know that you've had your own battle with that as well. And I am very thankful and happy that you and your family have recovered. And that was genuinely an amazing experience to walk through that with you. And I thank you very, very much for opening yourself up to us and sharing that with our members. I do look, so one of our members is asking, is there a pandemic equivalent of Urban Shield?
You know, there were. So one of my colleagues at Kroll worked for the White House, and he was in charge of emergency planning for the Justice Department in the White House. They did tabletops, not as real life as we did for Urban Shield, but they thought about, you know, what to do if Ebola got out, if bulimia got out, some of the lessons learned. I think it probably wasn't as well practiced as it should have been. And, you know, clearly, so the same challenges, right? Information is changing and flowing all the time. Good information, bad information. Communications between groups, disciplines who come at the problem differently. So if we had a focus where we brought people together and game played this challenge that we're going through right now, I mean, we're doing some great stuff, right? But it took us some while to get some steam on how we should be dealing with this. And I think when you look at Germany's experience, they were a little more well prepared, I think, because they train and think for the challenge to come. I remember my training team, they'd put so many scenarios together, and we would meet weekly, and I would, you know, and I'm the boss, so I got to kind of challenge, and I'm a jokester too. So they talked about all the stuff we're going to do at Urban Shield, and I said, you know what, I think we've covered everything, but I haven't heard anything on volcanic eruptions or a meteorite strike. And they looked at me around the table because they just killed it. The training they had done had killed it. And they're like, yeah, well, we don't think there's volcanic activity in Boston, boss. And I said, you know who said that? People in Pompeii. That's what famous last words. That was February 12th. The next day, there was a meteorite strike in Russia. The week after, they had a volcanic eruption plan and a meteorite strike plan, just because, you know, you have to be prepared for everything. But I have I'm an excrement magnet, so there's no surprise that there's a meteorite strike right after I raise the point with my team.
There's a couple more questions. How do you ensure your team gets and accepts the support that they need?
We screwed it up at first. So the emotional support is something you have to order them to do. We're warriors. We're made of armor. We say, nothing phases me. It's the same with our military, which is why we have so many kids taking their lives with their own hands after they saw things they never should have seen in some of the deployments they've had. So you have to make it mandatory. I had a guy, I ordered, I don't know, 70, 80 cops in a room that they're all going to crisis, counseling. And this guy said, I don't need that bull. And I said, you know what? You probably don't, but your partner might. And because you stood up and put your hand up that it's bull and you don't need it, he's not going to go. So you're going to go to the room and you're going to sit down, you're going to shut up, and I don't want to hear from you. And I heard back from him afterwards saying, you know what? I didn't think I needed it, but that was great. So sometimes you have to have a program in place that forces people to go. That makes it so it's not out of the ordinary for somebody to get help, and you got to keep checking in. I care about my cops. I care about them today. I've been calling kids who have been sick with COVID. And I think if your team knows that you care about them personally, they'll do anything for you. And one of the challenges I had as a police chief, sometimes in crisis or an event, we would tell cops what to do. We wouldn't tell them the why. For example, the marathon, I wanted cops in every corner the next day because I wanted every citizen to feel safe. I wanted everyone coming out of the train station to feel like they go to work and they saw officer friendly on corners, and we'd make people feel comfortable. I got a call about 8 hours into deployment. Why do you have these guys doing traffic posts? We're not doing traffic posts. There's no traffic. It's 22 blocks of the city shut down. I don't want anyone doing traffic. Why would you do it? Well, you got them all on traffic posts. I said, that's foolish. I went down to my team and I said, the president of the union says we get guys on traffic posts. Do we have people on traffic posts? Yes, sir. You said you wanted people at every intersection. That's how we put people on traffic posts. The cops were furious. I had to bring them all in and have a conversation. I said, you're not doing traffic. I want you to do this. I want you to be officer friendly. I want you people to feel safe. Cops who were furious that they were staying in traffic posts, once they knew what the mission was, that they fully bought in to keep their citizens safe, they were like, I'll stand there for 18 hours. That's fine with me. Sometimes we got to tell them the why, not just the what they need to do.
Absolutely. We have another question. What did you learn from the marathon that if there were another bombing at the marathon, what would you do differently?
I would make sure my wife was well informed about my children's activities for the day before I went down there. I learned that lesson well. We were well prepared. We had cops. I had helicopters that were taking radiation detection readings of the marathon route. We go down a couple of days beforehand and we see what the radiation level should be, and we're flying over and we're detecting radiation. 7 minutes after the bomb went off, my bomb tech hazmat guy taps me in the shoulder and says, Chief, it's a clean bomb. There's no chemical, there's no radiological, there's no biological. We had assets looking for chemical, radiological, and biological detection should they go off. We were pretty well prepared, but you can never be prepared for everything. So it's not having a perfect plan, it's the planning process. The next year, we put more cops out. I can't have a conversation about some of the things we are doing currently because it would impede the safety and security of what they're doing. We don't want to give away all the tricks of the trade. We learn lessons on how to do things better. I learned, that I got to take my own advice. I got to get my sleep. I've got to build, somebody behind me that can step in, and I got to be a big enough person to let them step on the dance floor and have me get off because, you can't stay up for 5 days and think you're going to be effective. I landed helicopters in a mall. And I had a hard time standing. I shouldn't have been making those decisions and those deployments. I was actually putting people in harm's way.
So we have one last question, and then I think we can wrap it up. Then 90 days after, how did you deal with the transition back into daily work and new crises?
So July 4th was a big day for us because we were going to have big crowds. The July 4th celebration was the original target of the Zanaya brothers. And they made their bomb so quickly, they decided to move it up to the marathon. So we were tense that day. And I knew my cops were going to be in huge crowds. And I knew my cops were going to smell gunpowder. Many of them for the first time since the marathon. So we brought extra crisis support team in. We brought in some professional psychologists, some clinicians. And we were going to roll calls, telling people, hey, let us know if you need anything. Let us know if you need to change your assignment. We're here for you. We started to realize that, the marathon, people say, wow, that was a great job. It was a lot of success. We did a lot of things wrong. We had cops shooting at each other. We had cops putting innocent civilians in danger by their lack of fire control. We could have done things a lot better after we had some time to catch our breath, along with doing emotional support for our cops and firefighters and medics and first responders and our victims community. 90 days, it was amazing because the victims some of them were starting to get out of the hospital, had been there for a long time, and it just continued the sense of Boston strong. But we then looked in the mirror to find out, what could we do better the next time, and we started doing some after action reports on the good, the bad, the ugly of the Boston Marathon response and where we could improve. There was certainly training we could have given officers and firefighters and medics. There was certainly equipment and certainly leaders could learn from each other and learn some valuable lessons. And it's important, if you did well and won the World Series or you lost it, put that mirror up and find out what you can do better. Your job as a leader is to take your good organization and make it greater.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you for everything you've done. We are going to have another webinar next week, and Dr. Jeremy Lurie from Santa Monica, an LA member, is going to review key strategies and strengths about approaching our setting and strategic goals and communicating more effectively with our remote team members, and as well as returning to the office. So we're going to talk about managing performance with remote workforce to better serve your high value clients. So please join us next week. Dan is a member. If anyone wants to reach out to him, you can find him on the hub. Again, I thank you so much for being a member. Thank you for being willing to share this story with all of us. And I look forward to meeting you in person one day.
Thanks. It sounds like a plan. I can't wait for the world to start rolling again.
You too.
Be safe, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.